this morning on BBC One Now, here's Vanessa.
In 45 minutes after the Bramley saga, we meet the woman who says her childhood was ruined when she went on the run with her foster parents. And we ask, are you too posh to push? We meet the women who say, forget natural childbirth, we demand a caesarean. And three sisters make their bid for fame in A Star Is Born. All this and more at 9:45 after Kilroy.
Hello and good morning. I suppose not one of us can be unaware of the heartbreaking story of the Bramleys. They were so desperate to adopt the two little girls in their care, Jade and Hannah, that they went on the run. But you know, there's a staggering 10,000 children in care waiting for social services to find them suitable adoptive parents. And now the government's suggesting that teenage mothers ought to consider giving up their children for adoption. Is that a good idea? Or just the way to cause even more heartbreak? What do you reckon about this, Mandy? Jack Straw, the Home Secretary's idea, single mothers, give up your children for adoption, good idea?
No,
Why
I think
not?
he's crazy.
Why?
I had my daughter adopted 27 and a half years ago, and the pain's never left, and I'd love to find her.
Why did you have her adopted?
I didn't want to get married at the time.
How old were you?
19.
Right.
I felt as though I'd done something wrong. That's how they made me feel.
Who made you feel?
Social services. They thought it'd be best if I had the baby adopted because I wouldn't be able to support it and give it a good life.
And so you did have the baby adopted?
She was 11 months old at the time.
What did you feel when you gave her up?
Hurt. I kept wishing someone would say stop doing it.
Can you remember the moment when you let her go?
I can remember the moment signing the piece of paper.
Can you remember the last sight of her? Do you want to describe it for me?
Very hurtful.
What were you thinking?
As though I was dreaming in a nightmare,
What were you feeling?
crying inside, hurt.
And now, do you still think about her?
Oh, every day,
Every single day?
every day.
And you've never seen her?
No.
And you think about this child you gave up for adoption. The Home Secretary says that single mothers, particularly because he says many of their children end up in care, or a significant proportion end up in care anyway, should give those children, or should consider seriously giving those children up for adoption. What would you say to the Home Secretary?
No, because it's too painful for the mother.
It's too painful.
Well, I think that Jack Straw is in part, maybe has got a point. I think that I gave my son up when he was 18. When I was 18, sorry, he was adopted. And it was
hard to give them up when they're 18. I mean, you want to give them up when they're 18.
It was horrible and it was hard, but it was better for him. He had two parents who would love him and look after him and give him all the things I couldn't. And Mandy's right, not a day goes past without I don't think about him, but I'm convinced in my soul I made the right decision.
Well, I feel sorry for the child as well, because, I mean, if you have one parent, that's yours.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I think that he had two parents that could give him everything. I could offer him nothing. I had nothing.
So you're two cheers for Jack Straw?
Well,
Or a half cheer?
A half a cheer.
A half cheer?
I think you should make
Lila?
people more aware that adoption is an
It's an option. Oh, so you think he's done a good thing in actually saying to them, consider it?
Yes.
And it might be a good thing?
Yes.
You actually think it was a good thing for your
It
child?
was a good thing for my child,
Good thing for you?
Yes.
Good thing for both of you?
Feelings.
Tell
How
her.
would he feel? How would he feel if he had to give one of his children up or his grandchildren?
Absolutely terrible, I would imagine, like I feel. But some things have to be done for the better, for the good. And I felt that
it
for
was
my
better
son.
at the beginning. I thought, yeah, she's going to have a good life, but you never know where they've gone to.
Well, I was adopted myself, and my mum and dad are my mum and dad. I'm special, I was chosen, and if my son is brought up in the same way to be made to feel special and like he was picked, then I have no problem with that.
That's not always the case.
Yeah, that's what I was
That's
going to say.
definitely
It's
not
not
always
always the case.
I was fostered. All right, my mother died when I was about a month old, and I had to be put into a Dr. Bernardo's home. I was fostered out when I was 1 year and 3 months old, and it was basically hell for 20 years. So it's not always the case.
Well, it's not always the case, but there are happy stories. I mean, my adoptive dad died when I was 5 and my mum died when I was 14. But nevertheless, I had a really, really good upbringing. They loved me, they wanted me. And that, I would have thought, is what's important.
Cautious welcome to Jack Straw's notion then, Lila, sorry.
I don't think that anyone should be talked into placing a baby for adoption. I think that what we've heard
What do you feel about Jack Straw's suggestion?
Well, I think, as I've said, I don't think anyone, any young mother, should be talked into placing a baby for adoption if it's not something that she is sure that she wants to do. And I think what we've heard there is two different viewpoints, and it's about...
We know we've heard two different viewpoints. Like we've all consciously heard. Yeah. We've all been listening to their two views. We know that. What I'm asking you is, what do you feel about what Jack Straw is suggesting? Is it just that you're saying nobody should be forced into? That seems a kind of...
I don't think it's something that...
bit New Labour-ish, that. Two sides of the fence, let's be popular, let's not upset anybody.
I mean, I think it's about adoption is a very serious thing to do. I mean, basically you're placing a child with another family who are going to have that child for the rest of its life. If it's not something that you're sure you want to do, nobody should be there to say, look, you've got to do that, we've got to push you into it. Because as you've heard, you never forget that child.
I can still remember the days when young teenage pregnant mums were virtually given no choice. There was such much shame and stigma about being an unmarried mother, adoption, getting them out of sight.
In a way, like Mandy was made. She actually said, I felt that I'd done something wrong.
I mean, God forbid we should ever go back to those bad old days. I would be horrified, and I would be very angry if any of my social workers were encouraging or persuading someone to give up their child totally wrong. The only thing I would say is that there are a very small number of young mums for whom adoption is an option. And I have no problem about them being given the option of considering it, i.e. being given information, they can consider it. I hope in many cases, or in most cases, it won't be the option they choose, but they have a right to know about it.
You're going along with what Anne was saying.
Absolutely.
At least he's kind of raised it as an option you should consider. He's put it on the agenda.
But can I just say, I think if they are given that information, they need to be given all the information, like how painful it can be and how it could be a lifelong pain for them.
Well, I would love to have had my... excuse me. I would love to have had my daughter back when she was 3.
You've been holding that there. I don't know whether we've seen this, but all the way through, and you've never got the courage or the whatever to actually pull it up. This is your daughter, presumably?
Yes, Sharon.
Sharon, and you still feel that strongly that you're carrying the photograph and you wanted it to be seen here today.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I interrupted you, Mandy. You were saying about the ways about your daughter and about the pain.
I just wish that I could have had her back. I mean, before I was due to give birth to her, I just didn't want that baby to come. I thought, why can't it stay there till the time's right? Yeah. And then when I did meet my husband, she would have been about 4. And I used to think, I wish I could have my baby back now. And even my husband said, you should have kept her. So
this is what you need to know. It's the kind of thing that Wesley's saying, if this scheme is going to actually operate, people need to know what the consequences are, not just now, but long term. How somebody like Mandy is going to feel like in 20, 30, even maybe 40 years' time. If this happens, of course, it means there are going to be more children available for adoption. It means the social services are going to be looking for more parents to adopt them, doesn't it, Stuart? Do you think they're going to be more flexible in the way they adopt their criteria, or are they going to behave like they did with you and say, sorry, I know you want to over-adopt, but you're overweight?
Oh yeah, I mean they try and play God and they're not. I mean, all right, they're put down to criteria. I mean, it's, they've got their rules and regulations, but then they go between the lines and they do what they want to do, and it's all much of a muchness with them, and you've got to fall in with their criteria.
And what happened to you?
We were turned down twice for adoption because of my weight, being overweight.
They actually said that to you?
Yeah, I've got it in writing. Yeah, I mean they put it to the fact that, I mean, I was overweight and a long-term health effect. It could affect my long-term health.
Which is what they said?
Yeah, which I don't disagree with.
How heavy are you?
About 26 stone-ish.
Right.
Ish.
Well, ish.
Ish. Yeah.
It goes up and down. How did you feel when they said you can't... And you've been waiting how long, you and Julie?
We tried for our own children for about sort of 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
And is that when you got
just nothing was happening. I mean, we tried everything. We tried the holidays and we tried the lot, but nothing was going on. So then, you know, we had a sort of a bit of a discussion about trying to go for adoption, which we did. Went through a bit of a palaver for that.
Were you shocked when you were told that it was because you're overweight?
I was actually, yeah.
What did you feel, Julie?
Same as Stuart, really shocked.
Shocked, angry?
Yeah, really angry. If the social worker or the chief of the adoption agency had walked in, I probably would have wrung his neck.
You were going to provide this child with a nice, loving, secure home.
That's right, yeah.
You would have loved it like your own child.
Yep.
You would have given it security and affection.
Yep.
But it was because he was overweight, you couldn't have it.
They turned around and said no.
What are we doing, Wes?
That sounds a pretty strange thing to do. Can I just very briefly tell you a relevant story? I was a member of an adoption panel, and the medical report described the woman in concern as being obese, which is a medical term for anybody who's not anorexic. And we had this discussion about the problem of this woman being obese, and then the social worker who was working with the family passed around a photograph, and it became obvious that this woman was actually less fat than 3 members of the panel. I'll be in trouble for telling this story, I can guarantee that. But the issue...
What were their names?
But you see, suddenly it stopped being an issue, because they saw a picture of someone and it wasn't a big issue. I mean, the guidelines that Paul Birdsong introduced last year made it very, very clear that you've got to look at a number of issues when you're considering adoptions. Health is one of them. If the medical advisor says this person is so overweight or there's such a big problem, they're not going to survive long enough to parent the child, you have to take that's a big concern.
So you can imagine doing that and looking at Stuart and saying, sorry, I've got the medical advice, can't do it.
But what the guidelines say very clearly is that it's not one factor to take on its own.
That's right. I mean, that was the only thing that we had in writing from them, and that was the reason that I was overweight. And I wasn't even given a medical at the time. Yeah. I mean, the medical advisor never even saw me.
Julie?
Yeah, I was just going to say what Stuart just said, that we never see no medical advisor. All it was is they put down on a piece of paper saying that he was 6'2", 26 stone, and the medical advisors just looked at that bit of paper and said, no way. There was no medical, that we even checked with our own doctor to see if they'd checked with her, and they said no, there'd be no...
I offered to pay for a full medical, and they're like sort of 70, 80 quid. And yeah, you can have one, but it won't be any
The guidelines are very clear. It's one factor. One of many factors must be taken into consideration.
But one of them is medical, and weight might play a part. You're nodding your head in kind of agreement,
I would agree with that, yes. I mean, I think, as Wes has said, that it is one of the issues. It certainly is guidelines that were introduced in the last couple of years.
So it's quite right that should be one of the issues?
Yes, it is, because I think what we're doing is we're looking at placing children, not just now, but say in 15 years' time.
OK.
And what we want is the adopted family to still be there.
All right, but I know I don't want to be unfair to you or to Stuart, but he understands what I'm doing. If you know how you can see Stuart, you know how heavy he is, you know the decision was made, would you make the same decision?
I think what I'd want to have is the information from your GP and to have had a medical and that, but it's very difficult to talk about specific issues and just how different...
well, that's the thing, I mean,
he's a specific issue. He's a real person.
there was no medical record sought from a doctor. There was no medical at the time. As I said, I even offered to pay for one myself. Right. And they said, it's not worth it.
If you got that medical information and it was to his disadvantage, you'd look him in the face, and Julie, and say, I'm really sorry, you cannot have the child. Because that's what the guidelines would say, and that's what the medical...
If the medical advice was that there was too great a risk, we would say that, yes.
Yeah. OK, so what
if it was proved...
And you tell them straight that they're inappropriate parents.
Rather than sort of wander around the bushes and give other reasons.
If it was proved, I'd agree with it.
OK, what do we do now, given the fact that they actually... She got pregnant.
Yes. After 10
She's
and a
got
half
the baby.
years.
As we've all seen the baby, because it's been crying and we've carted it out because it was making a noise. But they've got their own child. We're going to take it away from them.
That's what I was going to say. We're going to take it away now. Social Security will take that away. Give it up. Adoption. Because he's too overweight to
we're talking about something quite different. I mean, I think what we're doing is we're trying to make plans about children who are being placed for adoption, and that is a significant change, and it has significant impacts across their lives. So therefore, what we have to do is we have to take perhaps extra special care about the families we choose and the parents we select.
We have to bear in mind, Steve, that adoption is a service for people who want to adopt. but it's
And for the children that we are
primarily it's a
placing.
service for children. And when there's a conflict of interest, the child's interests have to come first.
What's the
Yeah,
child's
but
interest, Alan? You were adopted.
I was fostered.
Fostered, right. But you were without parents.
But I
You
was
were in
without
care.
parents.
What's
and
the
I would
child's
much
interest?
rather have gone with Stuart and his wife, overweight with respect, and a loving family, than the people that I had who had got a son of their own. If there was an apple on the table, it was cut in half and says, Jack, do you want this half, or shall I give them half to Alan? No, I'll have them both.
I can see your point, but the other side of the story is if you've got a child to place and you've got a choice of possible families, one of the couples has a significant health risk, maybe for some reason.
Possible.
Another family doesn't have the health risk, which family, all other things being equal.
But it's not all. No, that's
not
not true.
all other
Because
things are never equal.
there's 10,000 kids.
I
You
would
haven't got equal. There's 10,000 kids in care. There's a shortage of families, and you're turning down a family because he's overweight.
I
the
mentioned
child
here was a little while ago, he might live for just 15 years. I had 20 years of hell. I'd rather have 15 years of love and cuddles.
An overweight person is going to die sooner than a thin person. I mean, at the end of the day, right, we've all got different lifespans, right? I mean, it doesn't matter that we're fat or we're thin. We all go along, we've all got a set pattern to go along in our lives, right? We could walk out tomorrow and get run over by a bus.
Exactly.
Right? And there's childless people out there who can't have children, who've got the likes of yourself dictating that we're too fat, we smoke, we haven't got enough money, we don't come from the right background. I myself have got no children, I got no chance. You're my only chance. And I'm very angry, and I'm sorry, I'm just getting really upset by you listening to everything that's going on, and I really feel happy for that couple, because they have got what you couldn't give him, and I thank God that they got what you couldn't give him. And it's obvious, I mean, if he wants to stay that way, then that's up to him. As long as he's happy and he's given the love that his child needs, what any child needs, then I'm sorry, it's a waste of time, and you're not doing yourself any favours, and you're not doing those kids any favours.
Why are you angry?
Why am I angry? Because I was turned down myself. I thought I'd be turned down for being overweight, because I am a big girl, but I'm healthy. I'm not saying I'm fit, I can run round the block 10 times, whatever, but I'm healthy.
Who needs to run round a block 10 times anyway?
Well, I'm healthy. Who's to say I might outlive you? You know, you might, 70, whatever, I might get to be 95. You might only get to be 65, 70, whatever.
But you were turned down.
But I was turned down.
Why?
Because I smoke. My one sin is I smoke.
Ridiculous. I'm adopted. My dad smoked for as long as I can remember, and I've had a fantastic life. My mother was an Irish Catholic girl, my birth mother, from the 60s. She had no chance, there was shame. I would like to trace her eventually, but my real mum and dad are the people that adopted me. They're the people that adopted me. Those are my real mum and dad.
Smoking?
Smoking, yes. I mean, to turn someone down because they smoke would be a complete breach of the guidelines that came out that Paul Birdsang introduced last year.
But you were
wrong.
before that. He only introduced the guidelines to stop you doing all these kind of things, to stop you turning down people because they were overweight or because they were smoking.
I think, no, it's not really true. Some panels.
Some were.
Some adoption panels turned people down.
You've just given us example of the 3 fat ladies who turned down the
They didn't turn them down. They didn't turn them down. They just
well,
made
they were
it an
going
issue.
to until you made the point.
Probably. But I mean,
what was his thinking?
I smoke, and I've just adopted 2 boys on Saturday. They moved in with us, and I'd like to say we're all talking about choices and options. Children do not have choices or options about whether they're going to be adopted. They've suffered loss, they've suffered trauma, they've suffered rejection. All we can do is make sure that they don't go through that again. And I think it is hard. It took us 2 years to get our boys. It is difficult, it's intrusive. But if I got a choice to stop doing something to get my children, then I would do that.
Which is what I would say,
I
because
smoke and I've got 2 boys. Different agencies have different rules.
What's the difference then?
Some people say you can't adopt under 2. Other agencies say you can adopt if you
well,
smoke.
I
Others
was told,
try.
Can I say something?
I come back.
Because of the age, we was turned down for fostering because they thought it would be too much of an emotional wrench at the end of the day, right? Because we'd lost 2 of our own, right? I mean, I didn't take them full term, I only went so far. But those 2 pregnancies cost me my childbearing years, right? I can't have children, full stop. I've had 2 goes on IVF. My last chance and my last hope was yourselves, right?
I recognise that, yeah.
When the social service worker came to see us, whatever, he sat there and I asked him if I could have a cigarette. That fella sat there while I smoked that cigarette And he didn't at one point say, oh, well, don't bother because they won't accept you because you smoke.
Can I just be very clear what the issues are about smoking? The Royal College of Physicians published a report saying that for very young babies and for children with chest and heart conditions, it's not in their interest to be around heavy cigarette smoking. We have to.
So she'll go outside and smoke. So she'll go outside and smoke. Hang on, I want Wes to finish.
But for an older child or for an adoptive couple who are prepared to make reasonable arrangements for where and how they smoke, the fact that they smoke is not a reason to turn them down.
So everything else that goes around around a child, right? Everything that's in the atmosphere anyway. So I'd just be to blame if that child caught a chest infection from me having a cigarette, or from it breathing the same air as well.
All I can say is when there is very clear medical advice, we are required to take it into account.
Yeah, you see, the problem is 17,000 children under the age of 5 have been hospitalized for things like cot death, respiratory disorder because of passive smoking. That is a serious number of children. I believe if you really do want to take, and obviously you feel so much about it, I think you will consider giving up smoking just to adopt the child, because you can give up smoking.
I can give up smoking and I'll still be turned down. Shall I tell you why? Because I'm on depression tablets, and I have been since I lost my second child, right? And I was told that would go against me because I regularly take Prozac tablets. Right, so if it wasn't smoking, it would have been because I'm on depression, and the only reason I'm on depression is because I can't have a family of my own.
Yeah, well, you've just mentioned that the reason why you were refused was because of smoking.
Smoking, yeah.
And you're saying that's justifiable?
Yeah, it's justifiable because there's a big problem with passive smoking. It's just getting larger and larger.
Fufu?
Well, I think what this is showing up, really, and it's from what you've been saying as well, is that different places, different associations have different rules, and as prospective adoptive parents you don't know what they are, so you can't come back and say, well, actually this is what they say about smoking, and you can't come back.
You should know what they are, because we live in an open society, in a democratic society,
we don't
and
know.
all this should be transparent. Well, you find out, and you insist on finding out.
There's nowhere to find out.
You get your member of parliament and nail him down and say, I want to know what the criteria are. What do I have to do?
If you do that, they then say you're over anxious, you're too
interfering,
or you're interfering, or you're this or you're that, and you're back worse than square one.
Don't you look at me like that. Did you see the look on his face? He was saying, don't point the finger at me, Robert.
No, I have a lot of sympathy with that point of view, because I think if you want to adopt, you're desperately anxious. It's very, very important to you, and I do hear what you say, and you're going to be desperately frightened about doing or saying anything that's going to lead to you being turned down. And I think where there are situations where foster parents or would-be foster parents or adopters should be legitimately challenging what the local authorities say to them, and they need to be enabled and supported in doing that. And I do agree that local authorities need to give a lot more thought to how they deal with people who are at risk of being turned down.
I'm an adoptive parent, and the first time round, my daughter's now 8. In early January, she was born in December, we got a phone call saying that we were going to get this child when she was 6 weeks old. At 6 weeks, we waited for the panel, we waited for a phone call, nothing. The next month, we waited again, nothing, no call. So we started calling the social workers and saying, look, when is this child going to come? Then next panel, still nothing. By the time the child was 4 months old, we actually rang the senior team leader and said, what is happening? Why isn't anyone saying? She's 4 months old, she was coming at 6 months. They made us go in front of this kind of Spanish Inquisition, senior team leaders, senior social workers, just me and my husband facing these people, and they said they were reviewing our situation because I was over anxious because I'd been ringing up to find out what was happening, and because I'd been knitting for the baby. I've been knitting. Knitting.
What's wrong with knitting?
Well, you shouldn't knit for a baby. It shows you're over anxious.
Of course you should knit for a baby. You've
not
got
according to these people.
Well, I'll tell you, if you can't have babies because you knit, then I shouldn't have been born, and none of my family would be because they're all knitting.
They said she would come with all the clothes. She arrived with nothing on except what I'd knitted for her.
I mean, again, if I can just come back to what the guidance said last year, if you're going to turn someone down for whatever reason as an adoption agency, you've got a duty to say why you're doing it and to justify that there have got to be good reasons that you can justify, not daft reasons that might be someone's life.
I want to go back to
I wish I'd gone through you.
Claire.
I mean, I just wonder how sort of whimsical and arbitrary it is, really, because a lot of the time I think that the overall welfare of the child is sometimes being hijacked by some sort of political correctness. And you will have your own personal agenda, and how objective can you be?
Why
ultimately.
and you're speaking from the
I'm speaking from
perspective of being
experience.
adopted.
Yeah.
And you're there. Let's imagine you are as you are now. You have the same intelligence and experience, and you can look back in retrospect, and you're now being asked as a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
We've got these parents, fat, overweight.
Smoke, drink.
Okay, well, there's a lot then. Smoke, drink, whatever, anxious, over. She's knitting for you.
They knit.
I mean, she's actually knitting clothes for you. She's loving to have you.
How dare she?
What do you say?
I say, absolutely, let me in there.
Why?
I mean, well, I think, you know, I had a really good experience. I was one of 9. I am one of 9, in fact, still, of which 4 are adopted. Mum and Dad had 5. And we were quite a sort of multinational family, if you like. There's me who's mixed, and another brother who's mixed, and another one from Newfoundland and
all
from
mixed,
Lithuania.
all mixed up.
All mixed, one
mixed
big
up,
sort
yeah.
of global hodgepodge. And it's the sort of thing that now it would simply be deemed impossible. And I had such a rich childhood. Yes, there were problems. But you know, the fact is
you're
that
saying there's a child like Alan who's sitting alongside you. And from the vantage point and the advantage that you have from looking back in retrospect, the fact that someone is overweight or that they smoked
Which
or
my
they're
dad is both, actually. God
well,
love him.
overweight and smokes.
Yes.
Answer this, Wes.
Well,
How
I was brought up, they smoked and drank, but I didn't. Why didn't I? I just chose not to smoke and not to drink. It didn't make a difference because I was in the environment. I've still got healthy lungs.
It's very
Can I
different
just
as
say
well
something
to
about
adoption.
smoking and drinking and in fact the weight and even the age issues? From a point of view perhaps of the child, and I'm not here speaking from personal experience, but actually having worked in social services, I'm talking in a sense professionally, but there is a problem where it's not just that the person will die, but what happens when they become old? And I'm now in a position where my own parents are well, one of them is now dead and one is ill.
Yeah.
Where that's actually a problem if the parents might become ill, the adoptive parents might become ill when the child is a teenager. It isn't a problem for me, I'm nearly 50. I can cope with my parents. But if you're putting a child into a situation where you know that in 10 years' time, that parent might, because of smoking or because of their weight or because of some other health issue, may become seriously ill.
So you're moving us on to age could be a problem.
I'm moving at age and what the wider issues of
Anita?
what's it...
I don't agree with you.
Hang on.
I don't agree with you because if you have a family, you have an extended family, a young extended family. When I adopted my second child, I had him from the time he was 5 days old. I fostered him. And when I put in to foster him, to adopt him, the social worker said, I'm too old. I went to my solicitor and she said to me, Anita.
How old were you, Anita?
I was 57. She said, Anita, if you weren't too old to look after him at the age of 57, you're not too old. I'm going to put in for adoption. And the solicitor went through and I've got my son. He's 10 years now, and that's my second son.
So you're 67
I adopted.
now?
I'm 67
You're 67?
now. Yes, I'm 67 now.
What do you want, Anita?
I've got my adopted child. Since then, I had a residence order child.
When you were working for Lambeth Council, would you have stopped having the child?
Yes.
Probably.
Yes.
Probably.
Look at her in the eye, come on, you know that.
No,
Why would you?
probably,
But look at her.
but,
Why? She loves him.
And
She's 67,
I don't
which
think
is...
that we should be. I don't think that one should be over rigid about age. What I said, I said that you take into account all of those things. You don't take into account any one of them. I mean,
But
if
this was the
somebody's
predominant
fit,
factor in Anita's
yeah,
case.
and if somebody is fit and healthy, and indeed if they
No,
also
no,
have a
Linda, you
health-
made the point quite fairly.
Yeah.
And it is, you know, think
Yeah.
her
If
son's
they're
10 and
alive,
she's
he's
67.
10. Yeah.
So when
And
he's
I've got
20,
her-
she's going to be 77.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if there are if you've got other members of the family, that child may not be wholly responsible for you, which might have not been the case had you not had other children and other support. But if you're placing a child into a family where that child is the only child, there are no others, there's no other family, the couple want the child, then when those
What
children
age would you
become...
cut off? What age would you cut off?
I wouldn't want to be too rigid, but somewhere...
You've got to do it somewhere, Linda.
around 50.
50?
Somewhere
So
around
you're out, Anita. You're finished.
Can I just say-
Hang on, somewhere around 50. I think you were around about 50, weren't you?
I was 52.
Talk to Linda.
Somewhere around.
And my husband was 55, and we have a grown-up family and we're fosterers. And we had a little boy of 21 months. And it's a long story, but his mother was terminally ill and she wanted us to adopt. And so, well, it wasn't social services, it was the social worker didn't think we were the right age and said no. And we also went to a solicitor who argued our case, and after 3 court appearances, we won,
where's
and we had a little boy.
Guidelines. I mean, the guidelines.
He's 50 too old.
Not necessarily. I mean, I think it's about looking at the age gap between the child and the prospective adoptive parent. It's also looking about the specific needs of that child. So maybe it's about saying that in your case, if that child has been there for that period of time, and all things being equal, that may well and looks as it was the right thing to do.
Well, he was in my care 1.5. I had him from 5 days old, and when he was 1.5, they wanted to give him to someone else.
But it's about checking out.
My parents were in the 40s when I was adopted, and at 32 I was arranging my father's funeral, and well, my mother had had a stroke 8 months prior to that, and she's in a nursing home now.
Yes, but it happened to young people as well.
I know that, but,
you know,
but I feel that my children miss out as well. I think it's not just the child, it's the grandchildren as well. My children haven't got their grandparents.
But I think
now.
we also have to look at I mean, these things sadly do happen to other people.
I can appreciate
I mean, one of the
But
things
you're saying she wouldn't do it. She's strong.
Yes,
she's firmer. Now she was adopted, but she's more stringent than the social services.
But it is different. You see, when you're natural parents, then your obligations are slightly different. But when you've been adopted, after all, they've chosen you, not usually the other way around. You're now responsible for 2 people who may become very ill and very demanding.
My mum's in a nursing home.
And it isn't such a
right. It's a mom.
You see, and you're
Claire
in your 30s.
You could
be.
She is my mum.
And rightly, and I'm not arguing with that. But I'm saying. Of course, it could happen when a person is not in their 30s but in their 20s, or even in their teens. And that's what I'm flagging up.
But it's not, there's not just babies out there.
Go on.
I'm not against them adopting. There's not just babies out there. I think for the older parent, there's older children to
So
adopt.
how would you have felt if you were being adopted by Anita, who was 57, or my friend here from Leeds, who's 52?
It probably wouldn't have bothered me much at the time. It's later on.
But you would have said no. If you're looking again, like we did with Claire, you're looking back.
At what age would I be then?
Or whatever age you were.
Well, I was 6 weeks old when I was adopted.
So at 6 weeks old, would you have said yes or no?
Probably no.
No?
Really? No.
Too old? Anita's too old?
I think it is.
So it wouldn't have bothered me, providing I had
Nothing
a loving
bothers
family.
you, Alan, does it? Nothing bothers Alan.
If I'd have got a loving parents, it wouldn't have bothered me what age they were. It wouldn't have bothered me if I'd buried them at 20 years old.
That's true.
My husband was 56 when our 2-year-old was placed with us, and I was well over 40 at the time. Now, I'm her 4th mother, and the final one, thank goodness. And the reason they couldn't find her anywhere was because she's black, because she's Muslim, and so on. And I'm sure that the reason they allowed us to adopt at a much older age than they normally would was because at 2.5 she still hadn't had a permanent family. So I think there are lots of things to take into consideration there. And I'm sure she'd much rather be with us now permanently than be shunted around the care system, which was what was happening to her.
I've got 2 young grandchildren. One's 8 and one's 4. And I think of them when I was that age, and I give them all the love I can just to give it to them.
My mum was 40 when she adopted me, and she had 3 children of her own, and she was a single parent, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. Because she was older, she gave me, you know, just so much. She was absolutely wonderful.
Because she was older, you mean because she was older? Because she had the experience of the time?
She had the experience. She had, you know, 3 children of her own. And they were much older than me as well.
Where's you seem nice and sympathetic, Wes.
Absolutely.
And understand. And I mean that genuinely, because you do, because I've watched you as people are talking, because I'm looking for a response from you, and each time you seem to be understanding what they're saying and appreciating it. When we're talking about age, and you're talking now as a professional, as a social services assistant director, you've heard what people say here.
Yeah.
How important is it? Would you normally kind of be predisposed to say no to somebody who was like Anita, 57, and Sandra, who is 52?
I think we're on the same wavelength here. I think I would say there was a time...
Well, Linda you're talking to.
Linda, sorry. There was a time then when I think we took age far too seriously. I would like to make the point that adoption panels are like any other group of society. They evolve, they develop, their views change. I think that in the past we got stuck in certain grooves. Age was one, weight was one, smoking was one, ethnic placements another one. I think it's taken a long time for people to realise there are a whole range of variables that you've got to juggle and somehow balance all those with what's right for the child.
And what's right for the child can be, if we're to believe Alan and Claire, though we also have a different view here, of course, from a child who's saying that it wasn't right to be adopted by older parents. In the main, it may not be, it may be irrelevant that the parents, the prospective parents, are fat, smoke, old, but what about the race?
Well,
ethnic background.
No two children are the same. What might be right for one child could be wrong for another child. You've got to look at that child and what are the other options for that child. If you're going to turn down a family and that child's options are no family or a long wait in a residential home or something, that's a bad decision.
Is it not true that the majority of children still in care at the moment are mixed race?
Well, a lot of children of mixed race are in care, and it's certainly true that, for example, some years ago, social workers would blithely place black children in white families and not even think it was an issue. All right? They were reminded very forcibly, quite properly, by the black community that it was an issue. Now, they went too far the other way. We were into the situation of trying to find the perfect match, you know.
But the fact of the matter is, let's go before Linda comes in here, is Claire, in answer to Claire's... We'll come to you. But in answer to Claire's question, the largest number of children in care of mixed race, black or mixed race, are available for adoption, as it were. But the largest, the prospective parents tend to be predominantly white. So you have, on that basis, a mismatch.
But let's try and recruit families from those communities.
That's a different issue. Right? Should you only adopt black with the same ethnic background, Linda?
In general, yes. In general, I would say yes. But I have to say, having myself also been on an adoption panel as a counsellor, I have approved adoption of a black child in a white family. I remember doing that when I was leader of Lambeth Council. I mean, I was meant to be not doing that, but actually I had to.
Why were you meant not to be doing that?
Well, not meant to be.
I'm saying politically incorrect, were you?
I did what was right in the... as often, taking into account the interests of the child, that child had actually been placed in long-term foster care with a particular family, had been there for 3 years, and a white family, and it would have been devastating for the child. For the basis of a policy
but
to
leaving
say...
that to one side...
well, no, one doesn't, because I think that the trouble with the policies that we've had is that they've received a lot of negative attention. It was right, I think, and I would still defend, absolutely defend, the rightness of ensuring that one of the things that is taken into account is the race, culture and black background of the child, and what one seeks to do is put energy into trying to recruit parents that will best reflect that.
But in the meantime, while you're recruiting the parents, the kids are in care. They're like Claire.
Well, sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not seeking to excuse it. I don't think that children should be languishing in interim situations where they're not sure which school they're going to be going to next year.
But that's what happens ultimately.
But then let's recruit more carers.
Fine, but that is what happens in the interim. And in that time, they're not getting any sense of their own black identity, which seems to be the main thing that the social services are arguing with. And what gives you a sense of self is love. You know, you're not just judged. Amongst other things. But, you know, that will equip you to deal with rejection, with prejudice, with racism, is if you can go back somewhere and say, look, Mum, look, Dad, this happened to me. I'm feeling awful.
And you did?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you were in a white family?
Yeah.
A white parents?
Yeah, white parents.
And you obviously, because you've spoken with your mum and dad, you refer to them as mum and dad, and
absolutely.
your
I hate
family.
it when people try to trivialise your position as an adopted person. Yeah, but you could fancy your brother. He's not your real brother. All that sort of...
Well, you get that sort of...
It's your foster parent or your adopted parent. It's your mum or your dad. In my case, it wasn't. But because I won't respect them for that. Yeah. But if you are in a loving environment like this young lady is, then it is your mum and dad.
But in fairness, you can see why people do that. But at the same time,
shouldn't be done.
There's always this little kid inside you that's saying, no, that, you know, that's my mum.
I was introduced by, I will call them my mum and dad for the sake of the discussion. Oh, this is our son Jack. This is our adopted son Alan.
Well, that's awful.
You see, now that put me down all the time.
So you're never theirs.
I was never theirs.
But Claire,
I was told if I ever got into trouble, I would be put into that black home back in London. Well, a 5, 4, 5, 6-year-old, that black place in London was like Dartmouth prison.
Would you have been? Would you say there's a black couple wanted to adopt you?
If there was a black couple.
Say there was a black couple.
No,
say were there a black couple?
You wouldn't have bothered me.
You would have preferred to be. They were loving.
In a loving
they were
home.
loving. They loved you.
Yes.
They called you their son.
Yes.
They didn't say we're going to send you back.
No.
They say we love you, Alan. And they'd have given you all the love and affection that a normal family gives to their child.
I would have gone to
you
them.
Wouldn't have
I wouldn't have had a choice, but I would have wanted them.
But you'd have wanted to.
I would have wanted them.
Yeah, Stuart.
What about Stuart? He's got. Are we going to say we can't do it because he's got tattoos and earrings? That's the next
on people's colour. I mean, that's the same with. I mean, if there's a little black child to be adopted, preferably to go to a black family or a white child to a white family. But then again, there's little fat children in homes as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
And there are
mean?
also lots of children with disabilities who we're not talking about, who don't get adopted,
Yeah.
who are languishing, and we're not as moved to be concerned that they also have loving and nurturing environments. I mean, I think we have to take on board the needs of every individual child, place them as far as possible in settings that are loving. I haven't mellowed, I'm exactly the same.
You knew what I was going to say!
I know your stereotype. I have said exactly the same.
Miss Bellos.
I'm sorry, I've said exactly the
same.
same.
And I thought, she really hasn't.
No.
She's saying on the one hand...
No, I always say that. No, I'm a grandmother, though.
And I'm a granddad. It makes a difference.
It does make a difference.
I
But I actually argued this when I was in a position
But what
of
we're talking
guidance.
about is those kids who can't call anybody mum or dad or granddad.
Well, I was in care with coloured children and disabled children, and there was 2 particular boys who didn't even get fostered because they were coloured, because social services wanted them to go with a family, black family, yes. So they were left, and they were. I remember them being in the children's home right from about the age 6 till they were 16, 17 and could leave. And they never, ever had a family. And all they wanted was a family, and they didn't care whether the family was white or black.
There were families, they wanted a family.
Yeah, there was families that would have had them,
Yeah.
but the social services...
white families would have had them.
White families,
But social services
wanted
wouldn't
them
let
to go
them.
to black families, yes.
What are we doing, Wes?
Children...
You want to give a kid a loving home, don't you?
That's
like Claire. You know, she got a loving home.
Yeah. I can't deny that's happened. That's yeah. You said it's happened.
To a lot of people.
And to a lot of people.
Hang on.
Yeah, and
It's happening now. My daughter is only 4 years old. She was available for adoption from the day she was born. She actually happens to be from the Horn of Africa. She's supposed to be being brought up as a Muslim. She was placed in a white family to be fostered at birth. She was with them for 17 months. When she was 17 months, she was taken away from there and put with a grandmother who the only thing she had in common with her was skin colour. The woman is Caribbean, the woman is a Christian, you know, she's not the same culture. And then it took another, from 17 months till she was 2.5 to be placed with us. And the only reason is her colour and her cultural and religious background.
Can I just say there are black families watching this programme. We need you. We need you as foster carers.
No, we don't need them. No, we don't need them.
We need you.
No, you don't need them. The kids need them. The kids need them. So, all right, you heard what the man said. You heard what Linda said. There's 10,000 kids in care. Majority of them, or a large proportion, let's put it like that, are black or from ethnic backgrounds. They need parents from similar backgrounds. Because that's what would be preferable, obviously, in the end.
Everybody, just parents.
Just parents, yeah, but, all right, we need good black parents to come along.
And there are
Wes,
plenty
I'm
out
still
there.
with you.
Yeah. I think that I would also like to say that I would acknowledge that adoption panels up and down the country over the years have got stuck in certain grooves, but they don't stay there. They are evolving, they are learning, we are developing.
They will change the people like
when
us.
you're learning and developing,
that's where they want to get
very
the voices
quickly,
from.
adoption can be a positive experience, can't it?
Yes, I've just completed 12 years of tracing my biological parents, and I've got to say, the lady that adopted me was the best thing that could ever happen to me.
Best thing that ever happened.
Best thing.
I suppose, you know, really, I was adopted in effect by my stepfather, so I kind of know a little bit about it. What's most important for a kid is not the race, the colour, the creed, the background, the size, the shape, the smoking with a parent. What is important is that you felt you're wanted and you're loved.
Hear, hear.
Take care of yourselves.
If you'd like to join Robert in a programme about mothers who have children by different fathers, call him now on 0990 200 567. Have you had several children by different men? Are you bringing them up on your own? Do you have to rely on state benefits? Are you a man who's had several children by different women? Do you think it's wrong to do that? Call too if you found it difficult being brought up with several half-brothers or sisters.
This is BBC One. This is Friday